Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch about all the issues to do with immigration. Robert says when Labour make big announcements, it means they're distracting you from something else, probably the budget. In this case, it will be a case of big words and little content. And Terry in Slough says how this country could do with Mrs Thatcher. She would soon put a stop to these small boats invading our country. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we've got a spineless, gutless Labour government that seems to care more about the welfare of asylum seekers and illegal immigrants than they do about the British people. Well, we'll hear from the Home Secretary a little bit later on. Shabana Mahmood will be up in Parliament. But one story I want to talk about now is Maxie Allen's story. Police have paid him and his partner £20,000, and well they might, because after they unlawfully arrested them, after they made complaints about their daughter's primary school, including on a WhatsApp group chat. This was really straightforward. Parents saying, actually there's some problems with the school, we need to sort a few things out. They sent a few emails in, they put up social media posts, and guess what? 6 police officers on their doorstep. Maxie Allen is with me now. He's a Times Radio producer, our sister station, Times Radio. Maxie, I'm delighted this has come to an end. I know it's been an absolute nightmare for you and your family and your children especially. Can you just take us back to the day you were arrested and just chat us through this?
Yeah, 29th of January, it was just before midday. My partner Rosalind and I were at home. I was in our side room on a Zoom call, and the first I knew that something strange was happening is on the little bit of the Zoom screen where you see yourself. I saw 2 figures standing behind me in high-vis jackets. They were police officers. I hadn't heard them come in, and a few moments later they arrested me. In our sitting room, 2 other officers were arresting my partner Rosalind in front of our 3-year-old daughter, and then another 2 officers began searching our house. So in total 6 police officers in 3 cars. And we were arrested on suspicion of harassment, malicious communications, and causing a nuisance on school property. Now, none of the 6 officers who came to our house that day, and our house was full of police for that period of time, none of them had been involved in it, so they couldn't answer any questions. They didn't know. But they took us off to custody separately. They had to summon my 80-year-old mother-in-law, who this came as a bit of a shock to her. Of course. To bring around the house to look after our 3-year-old and then our other daughter later in the day. So our children were deprived of their parents for a day. But we were taken to custody, and separately the full Monty really, DNA swab, fingerprints, shoe prints, mugshot, and put into cells. And then about 8 hours later, 9 hours later, we were interviewed by 2 detectives who also had no previous involvement with the case. It had just been handed to them. And I was expecting a sort of forensic examination, but they didn't really appear to have any evidence. And they didn't know either really why we'd been arrested. They had a vague statement from the complainant. It started, as you say, with some queries and discussion about our daughter's primary school, which is a state primary school. So it's a publicly funded organisation. I had been a governor of the school. I'd been a parent governor for 4 years and worked closely with the person who ended up reporting us to the police about 5 times. There was a change of head teacher. They weren't appointing a new one. They appointed an interim kind of forever, or so it seemed. And at the time it seemed to me like something wasn't quite right. I had been a governor, I'd done all the training, I began making some queries. They didn't like it, they didn't answer the question. We discussed it on a WhatsApp group, which was a private group. It wasn't to do with the school, it was private correspondence. Somehow some of these messages emerged to somebody senior at the school who I don't think liked it very much, and that was the first time they called the police. They then banned us from the school. So we couldn't have any normal conversations, we couldn't go to any school events, couldn't speak to a teacher. And
your daughter was still at the school at that time? She was still at the school. And what made it more complicated was that our daughter Sasha has some extra needs. She's on the SEND register, she has epilepsy, which is a disability, takes medication, and that made things more complicated. It doesn't give us extra rights, but it means that everything was more complicated. The ban was really complicated, so we pushed back hard. We pushed back really hard. Because there will be people, I'm sure, listening to this thinking, how bad was this guy? You know, what was he saying? What was he writing in those emails? What's the worst thing you wrote in the emails or the public posts or the WhatsApp group?
Well, there's not a single thing that I wouldn't read out on this programme. Our emails are about our daughter, sorting out all the problems with her education and her health and her welfare when we couldn't see any teachers or ever go onto the school site, and about the complaints process because we tried to overturn the ban. We never complained to the school, actually, until after we were banned, and we complained about being banned. In the WhatsApp messages, which were private, I mean, none of this has ever been disclosed. They've never put any of it forward. When we first discussed this story at the end of March, we went back through what we could find, and the strongest comment we could find anywhere was my partner referring to this senior school leader as a control freak.
I mean, that's not exactly a horrible thing to say. It's not a nice thing to say necessarily, but maybe that was your strongly held opinion at the time, and that was a reasonable thing to express.
Well, it was a private conversation.
And a private conversation. And what worries me about all of this is I know you. We've worked together. You know, you're a good bloke. You weren't doing anything other than standing up for your child. And then, because of reasonably expressed opinions, I would argue, and I'm sure you would too, 6 police officers arrive in your door. I mean, people will be really scared about that.
Yeah, I mean...
It cannot have been in any way a pleasant experience.
Well, no, I mean, it didn't really sink in till a bit later. I mean, at first it was just disbelief. It was like being in a film. I could literally not believe it was happening. And even in the cell, I had not been in a police cell before, it still felt unreal, and it wasn't until a few days later that it started to kind of, sink in. I must stress that our experience is not the worst that people will have at the hands of the police. It really isn't, mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff much more serious occurs than happened to us. And so it was really more of a point of us pushing back on it all, was kind of a point of principle. I mean, it was upsetting for our children, for my mother-in-law, for our neighbours. One of them was reduced to tears by the sight of these 3 police cars, and there's all of that. The thing about contacting any public authority to stand up for yourself, harassment in law is quite specific. There must be intent to cause fear and distress. Now, those are 2 important words, mm-hmm. Fear and distress. That's quite a high bar. Mm-hmm. That's got to be your intention mm-hmm. to do that, mm-hmm. and possibly, arguably causing an inconvenience. And I don't think we did, but even if we had, that is not causing fear and distress. So I think all in all, you can see why we wanted to kind of get a resolution.
Of course. So what happened next, and what's happened now?
Well, going back to the original event, so we were held in custody for altogether around about 12 hours. Then we were sent home. A few weeks later, I mean, it took a few weeks for them to work through it. We got a call from the detective who hadn't made the decision to say, his words, "I find no evidence of these offences." He gave us what's called no further action, so that was the end of it. I thought, well, this is kind of a story you've got to tell. Mm-hmm, so we told it, mm-hmm, and I was we were very lucky. Mm-hmm. We were very fortunate. We had the means to tell our story, mm-hmm. which many people do not. But then, at the time, the Chief Constable spoke about it publicly, and he wasn't having any of it. And he defended their handling, he defended the lawfulness of the arrest, and he said this decision to arrest, he said, was signed off at inspector level. But Rosalind thought, well, that's not right. So luckily, because we'd been talking about it publicly, the Free Speech Union, to whom I'm very grateful, offered to fund a legal action, and that process took place over quite a long time. And what I can make out is, in the cold light of day, the lawyers for the constabulary realised that original position was not sustainable, and their finding is, what they've conceded to us, is they had no evidence for necessity. No evidence for necessity, which I take to mean they didn't have any evidence at all.
Yeah. What do you think this says about where we are as a country, where someone who is a law-abiding citizen, someone public-spirited enough to be a school governor, who is trying to fight for his kid to make sure that she gets the right education, has 6 police officers on his door, is held for 12 hours, is asked all these questions by police officers who don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's really worrying, actually. There's so many people, I got people every single day on this show saying, you know, the police don't turn up if you're burgled. The police don't turn up if there's, you know, retailers, shoplifting. There's so many things we'd love the police to do. Instead, they're harassing people like you and your partner. What do you think that says about where we are as a country?
It's a very good question, and I don't think there's a one simple answer to it. I mean, no one's above the law, and of course I regard myself as having been law-abiding, but no backstory prevents you from this. I think there's several elements to it. In our particular case, there are still some unanswered questions about exactly what happened in the conversation between complainant and decision by an inspector. On a broader level, I think, you know, it is partly the police's interpretation, and they are under a lot of pressures with very old-fashioned legislation. Should be noted that Hertfordshire Constabulary have performed some very high-quality operations. They apprehended the culprit of the Bushy crossbow attacks, for example. They apprehended, there was an example of an unexploded bomb a few streets from us, which is a very successful policing operation. They've got a lot of things right, Hertfordshire Constabulary. That's important. But I think on a wider societal level, it's easy to blame the police. But I wonder whether it's a bit of Amazon culture. We're used to pressing a button. We want something, we press a button. We want a takeaway, we press a button and we get Uber Eats. People want a problem solved, they call the police.
Jonathan Ash-Edwards, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire, has said there's clearly been a fundamental breakdown in relationships between a school and parents, and this shouldn't have become a police matter. What is happening with your daughter now? She's no longer at the school, she's older now.
Well, we'd taken her out of the school 5 days before we were arrested, which is a slightly strange part of the story, because in our mind it was, we thought, okay, we'll give up here, we'll walk away. And then 5 days later the police came. So on the day we were arrested, it was actually her 3rd day, only her 3rd day at her new school, so it was already a bit of an unsettling time for her.
Of course,
and then no parents there for the rest of the day without explanation. But at her new school, and her little sister is at the companion infant school, everything is fine. Everything is normal, everything is fine, she's happy, both our girls are happy, and it's all good.
Well, Maxie, I know you got a few quid in compensation as this. I think you deserve every single penny. I think this is an absolutely awful thing that happened to Maxie and his family, and the problem is that it keeps happening. There are things like this, as you've said, that keep happening, that people get arrested and charged, and I know you weren't charged, but certainly held for long periods of time for absolutely no reason. Jamie's been in touch and says the police need to be out catching real criminals. This is ridiculous. Jamie, I agree with every word. Maxie, thank you for coming into the studio. That's Maxie Allen, who's a Times Radio producer and someone who just had a dreadful experience with Hertfordshire Police there, and if you've some thoughts or comments on this, do get in touch.